A family of four found dead the morning after prom. The house was locked from the inside. No forced entry, no witnesses, just silence. The only person alive was the 17-year-old son who'd been at a dance all night. Police found one critical detail. The family rifle was gone, taken by someone who knew exactly where it was kept. For 13 years, the case went cold. Then a detective discovered something that changed everything. One missing hour that nobody could explain. What followed was an arrest without a murder weapon, without fingerprints, without blood. Only a timeline and a theory. This is the true story of a cold case that asks one haunting question. How do you prove murder when the only evidence is time itself? Drop your country and current time in the comments before we begin. The morning of April 30th, 1989, arrived in Riverside, Ohio under clear skies and comfortable spring temperatures hovering near 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Reverend Nathan Brooks and his family attended Grace Fellowship Church every Sunday without fail, arriving promptly at 8:45 for the 9 o'clock service. Nathan believed punctuality reflected spiritual commitment, and his wife Rachel ensured their two daughters, Emma and Sophie, were always dressed and ready 15 minutes early. But that Sunday morning, the Brooks family never arrived. The pews they normally occupied in the third row remained empty as 9 o'clock came and passed. Congregation members exchanged concerned glances. By 9:15, whispers had begun circulating through the sanctuary. Nathan Brooks had never missed a service in 12 years of ministry at Grace Fellowship. Something was deeply wrong. At 9:30, two church elders, Thomas Garrett and William Hayes, made the decision to drive the 4 blocks to the parsonage on Maple Street. They arrived at 9:37 and immediately noticed Nathan's blue Chevrolet Caprice parked in the driveway exactly where it should be. The morning newspaper lay on the front porch, still wrapped in its plastic sleeve. Garrett knocked firmly on the front door 3 times. No response. Hayes called out, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to being heard. Still nothing. Garrett moved to the living room window and cupped his hands against the glass to peer inside. The interior appeared undisturbed. Furniture in place, no signs of struggle, everything neat and orderly. But the silence emanating from within felt unnatural, oppressive. Hayes pulled his cell phone from his jacket pocket and dialed 911. The call connected at 9:41. Riverside police officers David Chen and Margaret Sullivan arrived at 9:48. Chen had been with the department for 8 years, Sullivan for 5. They'd responded to wellness checks before, usually finding elderly residents who'd fallen or forgotten medication. This felt different. Chen knocked loudly and identified himself as police. Sullivan called through the door, announcing their presence and requesting someone answer. After 2 full minutes of silence, Chen made the call to force entry. Sullivan retrieved the battering ram from their cruiser. At 9:52, Chen gave the authorization. 3 strikes and the door frame splintered. The door swung inward. What they found would haunt Riverside for decades. Nathan Brooks lay face down in the hallway, 7 feet from the front door, his body positioned at an angle suggesting he'd been moving toward the entrance when he fell. Rachel was discovered 10 feet beyond him, near the base of the staircase. In separate bedrooms down the hall, 8-year-old Emma and 6-year-old Sophie were found in their beds. All 4 had been shot. Chen immediately radioed for backup and secured the scene. Sullivan checked each victim for vital signs, already knowing what she would find. At 9:56, she confirmed what they both already knew. 4 fatalities, no survivors. The house was locked from the inside. The deadbolt on the front door had been engaged. All windows were latched from within. There were no signs of forced entry anywhere. No broken glass, no splintered wood, no pry marks on any door or window frame. Nothing appeared stolen or disturbed. The television sat untouched in the living room. Rachel's purse remained on the kitchen counter with $63 in cash inside. Nathan's wallet lay on his bedroom dresser, containing $240 and 3 credit cards. Detective James Morrison arrived at the scene at 10:17. He'd been with the Riverside Police Department for 19 years and had investigated 6 homicides during his career. None had looked like this. Morrison walked through the house methodically, studying every detail. The scene suggested intimacy rather than random violence. Whoever killed the Brooks family had either been willingly let inside or possessed a key. Morrison's attention focused on a critical absence. The family hunting rifle that Nathan kept in his study was missing. The gun cabinet door stood open, and the rifle rack was empty. Morrison questioned Rachel's sister, who confirmed Nathan owned a Remington model 700 bolt-action rifle and .30-06 caliber. He'd purchased it in 1984 and used it for deer hunting every November. The weapon was always kept unloaded in the locked cabinet, with ammunition stored separately in a desk drawer. The missing rifle suggested premeditation rather than impulse. Someone had deliberately taken the weapon, used it, and removed it from the scene. Morrison examined the cabinet lock. No damage. Whoever took the rifle either had the key or Nathan had opened it himself. By 11 o'clock, the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation had been notified, and forensic teams were en route. Detective Morrison began constructing a timeline. According to neighbors, the Brooks family had been seen arriving home from an early Saturday dinner at approximately 6:15 the previous evening. The last confirmed sighting of Nathan alive came at 7:45 when he had waved to his neighbor Leonard Patterson while retrieving something from his car. That left a window of approximately 13 hours from 7:45 Saturday evening until the bodies were discovered at 9:52 Sunday morning. Based on body temperature and rigor mortis, the coroner would later narrow the time of death to between 8 and 11 Saturday night. Morrison's investigation quickly focused on the family's 17-year-old son, Connor Brooks. Connor had attended his high school prom Saturday evening and had not been present when the murders occurred. But as Morrison dug deeper into Connor's movements that night, he discovered something that would define the entire investigation. Connor had left for prom at 5:32 Saturday evening, confirmed by multiple witnesses including his friend Marcus Chen, who'd picked him up. Connor arrived at Riverside High School at 5:51. The prom officially began at 6 o'clock and was held in the school gymnasium. Over 300 students attended, and Connor was photographed at various points throughout the evening by the school's hired photographer and by fellow students with disposable cameras. But there was a problem. Between 7:28 and 8:43, Connor's whereabouts couldn't be definitively established. Multiple students confirmed seeing him at the dance at 7:28, dancing near the DJ booth. The next confirmed sighting came at 8:43 when Connor appeared in a group photograph taken by teacher chaperone Mrs. Elizabeth Hoffman, whose camera automatically stamped the time on each image. 75 minutes, unaccounted for, during the exact window when his family was being murdered. Morrison interviewed Connor at the police station at 2:15 Sunday afternoon. The interview was conducted in the presence of Connor's uncle, Robert Brooks, who'd driven from Cleveland after receiving news of the murders. Connor appeared exhausted and in shock, his eyes red but dry, his voice flat and monotone. "Where did you go when you left the dance?" Morrison asked. Connor stared at the table. "I needed air. It was hot inside. I went out to the parking lot. For 75 minutes? I don't know how long it was. I wasn't timing it. Did anyone see you? I don't know. Maybe. I wasn't really paying attention. What were you doing in the parking lot for over an hour? Walking around. Thinking. I had a lot on my mind." Morrison leaned forward. "Your father gave you permission to attend prom on the condition you'd be home by midnight. Is that correct?" "Yes." "Were you angry about that restriction?" Connor's jaw tightened. "I was frustrated, but I accepted it. He was my dad. He made the rules." "You argued with him Saturday morning about attending the prom at all." Multiple people heard that conversation. "It wasn't really an argument, more of a discussion. He had conditions. I agreed to them." Morrison studied the young man across the table. Connor's answers were consistent but vague. His demeanor was calm, almost unnaturally so. Morrison had seen shock manifest in many ways over his career, but Connor's flatness felt different. It felt controlled. "Connor, I need you to understand how serious this is. Your entire family was murdered last night. I need to know exactly where you were and what you were doing." "I was at the dance," Connor said, his voice cracking slightly. "I didn't know anything was wrong until I got home." According to Connor's statement, he left the prom at 11:38, confirmed by several students who saw him exit the gymnasium. Marcus Chen drove him home, Arriving at the Brooks residence at 11:52, Connor entered through the front door using his key. The house was dark. He called out but received no response. He walked down the hallway toward his father's study and discovered Nathan's body. He immediately called 911. The call was logged at 11:54. Emergency responders arrived at the scene at midnight exactly, but by then it was far too late. The Brooks family had been dead for hours. Morrison reviewed the timeline repeatedly. Riverside High School sat 2.3 miles from the Brooks home on Maple Street. At normal driving speeds, the trip took approximately 6 minutes. Connor could have left the dance at 7:28, driven home, committed the murders, and returned to the dance by 8:43. The math worked. Barely, but it worked. The investigation expanded rapidly. Forensic teams processed the Brooks home for 3 full days, collecting fingerprints, hair samples, fibers, and trace evidence. They found Connor's fingerprints throughout the house, which was expected since he lived there. They found no bloody footprints, no murder weapon, no cartridge casings. The killer had been extraordinarily careful or extraordinarily lucky. Investigators interviewed over 60 people, neighbors, church members, Connor's classmates, teachers, and friends. Most described the Brooks family as devout, private, and well-respected within the community. Nathan was known as a strict but fair pastor who held high expectations for his congregation and even higher ones for his own children. Rachel was remembered as kind and gentle, always organizing charity events and supporting church families in need. Several people mentioned tension between Nathan and Connor. Youth pastor Michael Lawson told investigators he'd witnessed multiple heated discussions between father and son over the previous 6 months, primarily centered on Nathan's strict rules and Connor's desire for more independence. Connor's close friend Jessica Martinez recalled him saying 2 weeks before the murders, "Sometimes I feel like I can't breathe in that house." But teenage frustration wasn't evidence of murder. Morrison needed more. He needed the rifle. He needed physical evidence placing Connor at the scene during the time of death. He needed a confession. He had none of these things. As weeks became months, the investigation stalled. Tips came in regularly, neighbors reporting suspicious cars, people claiming to have heard arguments from the Brooks home, conspiracy theories about church finances or secret affairs, but none led anywhere substantive. The missing rifle never surfaced despite extensive searches of wooded areas, waterways, and landfills within a 20-mile radius. By August, the case had gone cold. Morrison continued following leads, but resources were limited and newer cases demanded attention. The Brooks murders were moved to the cold case files, joining dozens of other unsolved crimes in boxes stored in the basement of the Riverside Police Department. Connor Brooks left Riverside in September to attend Ohio State University in Columbus. He changed his major 3 times, eventually graduating with a degree in accounting. He found work at a mid-sized firm, kept his head down, and avoided returning to Riverside whenever possible. He never married, maintained few close friendships, and lived quietly in a small apartment near German Village. Hannah Brooks, the surviving sister who'd been staying with friends the night of the murders, grew up in the custody of her aunt and uncle in Akron. She struggled with nightmares and survivor's guilt throughout her teenage years, attending therapy twice weekly.
Fragments of memories would surface unexpectedly: her father's stern voice, her mother's gentle touch, her sister's laughter. The trauma had fractured her recollection of the weeks leading up to the murders, leaving only disconnected images and feelings. Years passed. The Brooks family tragedy became local legend in Riverside, the kind of story people whispered about when discussing the town's dark history. The parsonage on Maple Street remained empty, eventually condemned and demolished in 1998. A small memorial garden was planted in its place, featuring 4 marble stones engraved with the names Nathan, Rachel, Emma, and Sophie. Then, in February 2002, everything changed. Detective Ryan Mitchell joined the Riverside Police Department after 12 years with the Cleveland Police Department. Mitchell specialized in cold case investigations and had successfully reopened and solved 4 previously unsolved homicides during his tenure in Cleveland. When he arrived in Riverside, he requested access to all cold case files for review. The Brooks case immediately captured his attention. Mitchell spent 3 weeks reviewing every report, every witness statement, every piece of evidence collected during the original investigation. He rebuilt the timeline from scratch, interviewed witnesses who were still available, and drove the exact routes between locations to verify distances and travel times. Mitchell's fresh perspective identified something Morrison had noted, but never fully pursued. The missing 75 minutes weren't just suspicious, they were essential. Connor had been seen at the dance at 7:28. He reappeared at 8:43. During that window between 8 and 11, the Brooks family had been murdered. Mitchell calculated that Connor needed approximately 12 minutes each way for travel, 6 minutes to drive home, 6 minutes to return. That left 51 minutes at the house. Was that enough time to commit 4 murders, locate and remove the rifle, clean up any obvious evidence, and return to the dance? Mitchell consulted with forensic experts who confirmed it was theoretically possible, though it would require efficiency and planning. The murders themselves would take only minutes if executed quickly. Locating the rifle required knowing where Nathan kept it. Removing the weapon and departing the scene could be accomplished in under 2 minutes. Mitchell interviewed Connor's former classmates who'd been at the prom. Several remembered Connor seeming distracted or preoccupied that evening. 2 students recalled him looking sweaty when he returned to the dance around 8:45, though they'd attributed it to dancing and the warm gymnasium. One student, Jennifer Walsh, remembered something else. His shirt looked different when he came back, she told Mitchell, like maybe he'd changed clothes or something. I didn't think much of it at the time. Mitchell pulled Connor's prom photos from evidence. In pictures taken before 7:30, Connor wore a black tuxedo jacket. In the photo from 8:43, he wore only a white dress shirt with his bow tie loosened. Multiple students confirmed Connor had been wearing his jacket earlier in the evening. Mitchell requested lab analysis of Connor's tuxedo, which had been stored in evidence since 1989. Modern forensic technology in 2002 was significantly more advanced than what had been available 13 years earlier. Analysts examined the jacket under high-powered microscopes and alternative light sources. They found no blood spatter, no gunpowder residue, nothing that definitively connected the garment to the crime scene. But Mitchell wasn't deterred. He believed the totality of circumstantial evidence was compelling. Connor had motive, a strained relationship with his father, and desire for freedom. He had opportunity, unaccounted time during the murder window. He had means knowledge of where the rifle was kept and access to the house. And he had the only key besides his parents. Mitchell presented his findings to Fairfield County Prosecutor David Brennan in July 2002. Brennan reviewed the case materials carefully. The evidence was entirely circumstantial. No physical proof connected Connor to the murders. The timeline was possible but not proven. The motive was speculative at best. But Brennan had successfully prosecuted cases on circumstantial evidence before. He believed a jury would see what he saw: a 17-year-old who killed his family to escape his father's control, then returned to a dance to establish an alibi. On September 6, 2002, 13 years and 5 months after the murders, Connor Brooks was arrested at his apartment in Columbus. He was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. Bond was set at $2 million, which Connor could not afford. He remained in Fairfield County Jail, awaiting trial. The arrest generated massive media coverage throughout Ohio and nationally. News trucks lined up outside the courthouse. Television legal analysts debated whether circumstantial evidence could sustain 4 murder convictions. Defense attorneys criticized the prosecution as desperate and evidence-thin. Prosecutor Brennan held firm, insisting justice would finally be served. Jury selection began in March 2006. The process took 4 weeks due to extensive media coverage and strong opinions within the community. The final jury consisted of 8 women and 4 men, ranging in age from 24 to 67. The trial was expected to last 6 weeks. Prosecutor Brennan's opening statement focused on the timeline. He used detailed charts and maps to show Connor could have left the dance, driven home, committed the murders, and returned within the 75-minute window. He emphasized Connor's strained relationship with his father and his strong desire for independence. He argued the missing rifle proved premeditation. Connor took the weapon intentionally and hid it so effectively it was never recovered. Defense attorney Catherine Harper's opening statement attacked the foundation of the prosecution's case. Ladies and gentlemen, the state will ask you to convict Connor Brooks without a murder weapon, without a single fingerprint at the scene during the time of death, without any physical evidence whatsoever connecting him to these terrible crimes. They will ask you to convict based on a possibility, a theory, a story they've constructed to fit their timeline. But Connor Brooks is not a story. He's a real person whose family was murdered, who has lived with that trauma every day for 17 years, and who now faces the rest of his life in prison based on speculation rather than proof. The prosecution called 43 witnesses over 4 weeks. Forensic experts testified about time of death, blood spatter patterns, and the missing rifle. Former classmates described Connor's behavior at prom. Church members discussed the tension between Nathan and Connor. The youth pastor recalled Connor saying he felt suffocated at home. Detective Morrison, now retired, took the stand for 2 days. He walked the jury through the original investigation, the locked house, the missing weapon, and the timeline that pointed to Connor. Under cross-examination, Harper forced Morrison to admit the investigation had identified no physical evidence linking Connor to the murders. "You have no murder weapon, correct?" Harper asked. "Correct," Morrison replied. "You have no fingerprints placing Connor at the scene during the time of death?" "His fingerprints were throughout the house, but he lived there." "I didn't ask if his prints were in the house. I asked if you have fingerprints proving he was there during the murders." Morrison paused. "No." "You have no blood evidence on his clothing?" "No." "No gunpowder residue?" "No." "No witnesses who saw him leave the dance, drive home, commit these murders, and return?" "No." "So your entire case against Connor Brooks is based on the fact that he can't precisely account for 75 minutes 13 years ago when he was 17 years old?" "It's based on the totality of evidence and circumstantial factors, which is another way of saying you have no physical proof." The defense called its own witnesses. Character witnesses testified about Connor's gentle nature and close relationship with his younger sisters. A forensic expert challenged the prosecution's timeline, arguing the distances and actions required would have been nearly impossible to complete in 51 minutes. Connor's former girlfriend testified he'd spoken lovingly about his family and had been devastated by their deaths. Then Connor took the stand. Defense attorney Harper led him through his background, his relationship with his family, and the events of April 29, 1989. Connor's voice remained steady as he described the argument with his father that morning, his agreement to the midnight curfew, and his excitement about attending prom. "Why did you leave the dance?" Harper asked. "I needed air and space to think," Connor replied. "The gymnasium was hot and crowded. I'd been looking forward to prom for weeks, but once I was there, I felt overwhelmed." "My dad and I had argued that morning. I knew he was right about responsibility, but I also felt like I couldn't do anything without his approval. I went outside to clear my head." "Where specifically did you go?" "I walked around the parking lot for a while. Then I sat in Marcus's car for maybe 20 or 30 minutes just listening to music and thinking." "Did you go home?" "No." "Did you kill your family?" Connor's voice broke. "No, I loved them. I would never hurt them." Prosecutor Brennan's cross-examination was aggressive. He hammered Connor about the vagueness of his story, the lack of witnesses who saw him in the parking lot, and his inability to provide specific details about what he thought about or what songs he listened to. "You expect this jury to believe you sat in a car for 30 minutes and can't remember a single song?" Brennan asked. "It was 17 years ago," Connor replied. "I was 17 and upset. I wasn't taking notes." "How convenient that you can't remember anything specific that might actually prove your story." "I'm telling the truth. You've had 17 years to come up with a better story than 'I was walking around' and you still can't?" "Because that's what happened." The trial lasted 7 weeks. Closing arguments consumed an entire day. Brennan painted Connor as a calculating killer who'd waited years to avoid suspicion. Harper portrayed him as an innocent man trapped by circumstantial evidence and prosecutorial tunnel vision. The jury deliberated for 4 days. On the afternoon of the 4th day, they sent a note to the judge indicating they'd reached a verdict. The courtroom was packed. Connor sat at the defense table, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Hannah Brooks sat in the front row of the gallery, her eyes fixed on her brother. The jury foreman stood. Judge Richard Walsh asked for the verdicts. "In the matter of the murder of Nathan Brooks, how do you find?" "Guilty." Hannah closed her eyes as tears streamed down her face. "In the matter of the murder of Rachel Brooks?" guilty. In the matter of the murder of Emma Brooks, guilty. In the matter of the murder of Sophie Brooks, guilty. Connor showed no visible reaction. Harper placed her hand on his shoulder. Prosecutor Brennan nodded solemnly. Sentencing occurred 3 weeks later. Judge Walsh sentenced Connor to 40 years on each count, to run consecutively. Total sentence, 160 years. Connor Brooks, now 34 years old, was transferred to Marion Correctional Institution. His attorney immediately filed an appeal, arguing the conviction was based on insufficient evidence and speculative timeline analysis. But for Riverside, the case appeared closed. After 17 years, someone had been held accountable. The Brooks family had justice. Except that wasn't the end of the story. In 2015, investigative journalist Marcus Chen, no relation to Connor's friend, began researching wrongful conviction cases in Ohio. The Brooks case caught his attention because of the complete absence of physical evidence. Chen spent months in Riverside, reviewing court transcripts, interviewing witnesses, and examining evidence. He made a discovery that had been overlooked during the original investigation. 3 days after the murders, on May 2, 1989, a man had appeared in the parking lot of a hardware store located 6 blocks from the Brooks home. Security footage showed him examining something in his hands. When the store manager approached him, the man claimed he was looking for a lost set of keys and quickly left. The incident had been noted in the original investigation file but never pursued. Morrison had assumed it was unrelated. Chen obtained the original security footage, which had been transferred to DVD in the early 2000s. He hired a video forensics expert to enhance the images. The enhanced footage revealed something stunning. The object in the man's hands appeared to be a distinctive ring gold with a small red stone. Chen compared it to photos of Nathan Brooks from church events. Nathan had worn an identical ring, a family heirloom passed down from his grandfather. The ring had been missing from Nathan's body. It was listed in the evidence log as unaccounted for. Chen tracked down the security guard who'd encountered the man. The guard, now 72 and retired, remembered the incident clearly. He seemed nervous, the guard recalled, like he was looking for something specific but didn't want attention. When I asked if I could help, he got defensive and left quickly. Chen obtained Nathan's personal effects from evidence storage. Among them were photos showing the ring clearly, the distinctive gold band with a ruby stone. If the man in the security footage 3 days after the murders had Nathan's ring, it meant he'd been in the Brooks home. It meant he'd taken something from the crime scene, and it meant Connor couldn't have been the only person with access. Chen brought his findings to Connor's appellate attorney. They filed a motion for a new trial based on newly discovered evidence. The motion detailed the security footage, the missing ring, and the failure of the original investigation to pursue this lead. It argued Connor had been wrongfully convicted based on circumstantial evidence while exculpatory evidence had been ignored. The Fairfield County Prosecutor's Office opposed the motion, arguing the footage was inconclusive and the ring could have been taken at any time, possibly even before the murders. The judge scheduled a hearing. Chen testified about his investigation. The video forensics expert explained the enhancement process. The retired security guard described his encounter with the nervous man. The prosecution called their own expert who argued the image quality was insufficient to definitively identify the ring. They suggested the object could have been anything: keys, a wallet, a phone. The judge took the matter under advisement. 2 months later, he issued a ruling. The evidence warranted further investigation, but was insufficient to overturn the conviction. Connor would remain in prison while law enforcement conducted additional inquiry. Detective Sarah Williams was assigned to investigate. She started with the enhanced security footage and began the painstaking process of trying to identify the man from 1989. She examined the footage frame by frame, noting physical characteristics. White male, approximately 6 feet tall, medium build, wearing work boots. She estimated his age at 50 to 60. Williams then reviewed the original investigation files looking for any similar descriptions. She found something interesting. On April 30th, 1989, a neighbor named Dorothy Palmer had reported seeing an unfamiliar man in the neighborhood 2 weeks before the murders. She'd described him as about 60, tall, wearing work clothes. Williams located Palmer, now 89 years old and living in an assisted care facility. Palmer's memory was sharp. He was doing some kind of work on houses, she recalled. Handyman stuff. I saw him 3 or 4 times in March. He stood out because he walked slowly and studied houses like he was taking inventory.
Williams checked property records and building permits from March 1989. She found one permit filed for the Brooks residence, a minor plumbing repair, completed on March 18, 1989, 6 weeks before the murders. The contractor's name on the permit, Carter Blake. Williams ran a background check on Carter Blake. He had a criminal record burglary conviction in 1985, served 18 months, released in early 1987. Last known address in Riverside in 1988. No records after that. Williams expanded her search. She discovered Carter Blake had died in January 2015 in western Pennsylvania. He'd lived alone, had no survivors, and had left behind a storage unit full of personal belongings. Williams contacted the storage facility and learned Blake's unit had been auctioned after his death when rent went unpaid. She tracked down the buyer, a man named Dennis Harper, who purchased abandoned storage units as part of his business. Harper remembered the unit. Mostly junk, he told Williams. Old furniture, boxes of papers. I sold what I could and donated the rest. Do you remember if there were any weapons? Harper paused. Actually, yeah. There was a rifle, old hunting rifle. I didn't have a license to sell firearms, so I turned it over to the local police department in Greenville, Pennsylvania. Williams's heart raced. She contacted the Greenville Police Department. After searching their records, they located the rifle in their evidence storage. It had been logged as an abandoned firearm from a storage auction, awaiting disposal. Williams drove to Pennsylvania and personally retrieved the weapon. It was a Remington Model 730-06 caliber. The serial number was partially worn but still partially legible. Williams contacted Remington and provided the partial serial number. After checking their records dating back to the 1980s, Remington confirmed the rifle had been sold to a sporting goods store in Canton, Ohio in May 1984. Williams contacted the sporting goods store, which had since closed, but located the former owner. He searched his archived sales records and found the transaction. The rifle had been purchased on May 12, 1984 by Nathan Brooks. Ballistics testing confirmed what Williams already suspected. The rifle recovered from Carter Blake's storage unit was the weapon that had killed the Brooks family. On February 14, 2017, Valentine's Day, Connor Brooks walked out of Marion Correctional Institution after serving 11 years for murders he didn't commit. The state of Ohio issued a formal apology. Connor received a financial settlement of $800,000, though no amount of money could restore the years he'd lost or erase the label of family killer that had defined his life. Detective Williams continued investigating Carter Blake. She discovered he'd burglarized multiple homes in Riverside in March and April 1989, using his handyman work as cover to study security systems and routines. On April 29th, Blake had entered the Brooks home, believing the family would be at a church event. But they were home. Nathan confronted him. Blake grabbed the family rifle and fired. Then he killed the witnesses. He'd taken Nathan's ring, a mistake born of greed. He'd returned days later to search for it, worried he'd dropped it near the scene. Blake had moved frequently over the following years, always staying just ahead of investigation, and had died taking his secret with him. But the rifle remained, hidden in storage, waiting to tell the truth. Connor and Hannah reunited privately. They embraced, both crying, both carrying scars that would never fully heal. Hannah had testified against her brother at trial, believing the prosecution's case. The guilt had consumed her for years. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You have nothing to be sorry for," Connor replied. The parsonage on Maple Street had been demolished years earlier, replaced by a small memorial garden. Connor visited for the first time since his release. 4 marble stones marked the spot. He placed flowers on each one. Riverside struggled with the truth. The community had demanded justice and gotten a wrongful conviction instead. The rush to solve an unsolvable case had destroyed an innocent man's life. Prosecutor Brennan, now retired, declined to comment publicly. Defense attorney Harper called for systemic reforms to prevent similar injustices. Connor moved away from Ohio, seeking anonymity and a fresh start. He changed his name legally and found work in a small town where nobody knew his story. The case became a cautionary tale in law schools and police academies, a perfect example of how circumstantial evidence can mislead how timelines can deceive, and how the absence of physical proof should matter more than theory. In 2019, Connor gave his only interview to Marcus Chen for a documentary about wrongful convictions. His words were measured, reflective. "I lost my family when I was 17, he said quietly. Then I lost my freedom. I lost my 20s. I lost the chance to build a life. The system failed me in every way possible. But the hardest part isn't the years in prison. It's that some people still believe I did it. Even with the rifle, even with Carter Blake, some people think I'm guilty. That suspicion never goes away." Chen asked what justice would look like now. Connor was silent for a long time. "Justice would be my family being alive. Since that's impossible, I don't know what justice means anymore. An apology doesn't restore what was taken. Money doesn't give me back those years. The only thing I have now is the truth, and that has to be enough." The documentary aired in 2020 to critical acclaim. It sparked national conversations about circumstantial evidence, wrongful convictions, and the rush to close high-profile cases. The Brooks case remains Ohio's most prominent wrongful conviction. The house is gone, replaced by flowers and stone, 4 names carved in marble, a reminder of lives lost and justice delayed. On April 29th each year, Connor returns to that garden. He places flowers on 4 graves. He sits on the bench nearby, and he remembers the last normal morning with his family before everything changed forever. The question that haunted Riverside for decades, can justice exist without proof, was finally answered. But the answer came too late for Connor Brooks, who spent 11 years in prison for loving his family, and 17 years total being suspected of killing them. The real killer died free. The innocent man was caged, and somewhere between certainty and doubt, justice failed everyone it was meant to protect. The Brooks family tragedy teaches us something profound about the nature of justice and truth. Connor Brooks spent 11 years behind bars, not because of evidence, but because of a timeline, a theory, and the desperate need of a community to find answers where none existed. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. How many other Connor Brooks are sitting in prison cells right now, convicted on circumstantial evidence and prosecutorial certainty rather than proof? What happened to the Brooks family reminds us that evil doesn't always announce itself with force and violence. Sometimes it arrives disguised as a handyman doing routine repairs, studying houses, learning routines, waiting for opportunity. Carter Blake walked among them for weeks before he struck, invisible in plain sight, trusted because he seemed ordinary. If you believe truth matters more than convenient narratives, then I need you to do something right now. Click that subscribe button below this video. Every subscription helps us continue this critical work. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what you think about this case. Do you believe circumstantial evidence should be enough for conviction? How do we balance the need for justice with the risk of condemning the innocent? And I'll see you in the next investigation.